Adrian. Here we are at a place well known to travellers around the world and Orcadians returning home, the famous John O'Groats signpost.
Yes, me from Edinburgh, and you?
From Orkney,
From Orkney.
Meeting here.
Yes.
And indeed, this is a place at the very north of Britain, where the Pentland Firth divides the British mainland from Orkney. And it's a place that our good friend John Flett Brown knew well and made many journeys from. John would go south to Edinburgh to study geology, then on to Oxford. He'd go southwest to Florida to lecture, then back to St Andrews. He'd go southeast to Spain and Libya and Kuwait as a field geologist, mapping oil deposits. And all the time his thoughts were very much on that distance to Orkney and returning there among his own community. And now, Adrian, you're here to study and explain the Pentland Firth that is around us just here, between us and Orkney.
Yes, well, of course, John can't be with us on this trip, which is a great shame, because he would truly have loved it. It combines the Old Red Sandstone, which he studied for many years, with the history of glaciation and the formation of the coast. And the Pentland Firth story is not a story that's really been told. We tend to think about Caithness and Orkney as separate, but of course historically people have travelled between the two very easily by boat. So it's entirely appropriate that we should begin our journey on the south shore of the Pentland Firth here at John O'Groats, and then later on with our friends we'll move over onto Orkney and the Hoy coast. So we've got a great trip in prospect.
Well, I wish you safe journey. If all goes well, I may even be on Stromness to join you. And in the meantime, every success, and may the sun shine brightly on your work.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you. Hello, Mara.
Hi, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
It's a grand day.
It absolutely is. It's a glorious view as well.
It is, yes. The stacks of Duncansby and the Moray Firth stretching out before us. But today, of course, we're more interested in the Pentland Firth.
Yes.
And we're going to be exploring the Pentland Firth and how it came to be. We're going to deal with a story which is all about the geology and the rocks, but also the ice age and the erosion from the glaciers, and then the power of the sea. So the way that we'll be exploring today is that we'll be going out along the southern shore of the Firth.
Sounds good.
And you'll be able to help us understand and interpret some of that, because you're a Caithness girl.
Yes, born and bred all my life up here in the glorious north of Scotland.
Oh yes, okay. But you have a background in engineering?
Yes, so I've got a master's in chemical engineering,
right,
but I am now the STEM outreach coordinator for the UHI, so I support a lot of the local schools. STEM, so science, technology, engineering and maths.
Okay.
So I support a lot of the young minds in developing some of their thinking and opening up some doors for them.
That's tremendous.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's really good.
It is a special view. I mean, that's what, about 5 miles across?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking out over the Pentland Firth, this fantastic seaway that connects the North Sea and the Atlantic, where all the freight comes in from North America going into Europe.
Yeah.
It's a fine panorama, but where are we looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look towards the west here, we've got John O'Groats just there. Behind that we've got Gills, and then we have Dunnet Head. Kind of behind where we're standing, we've got the island of Stromness.
Yep.
And then peeking off in the distance over there, we have the cliffs of Hoy.
Well, that's great because our trip is laid out before us. We'll head down to Gills Bay to have a look at some of the Ice Age sediments. We'll be up on Dunnet Head looking across to Hoy.
Excellent.
And asking that question of when did the Pentland Firth form? Well, how did it form? And that'll set us up really nicely for a trip to Stromness, where I've never been.
I'm lucky enough to have been a couple of times, and I am very, very excited to be going back.
Yeah. And then, of course, later on, we'll be meeting other people on the north side of the Firth, and we'll be coming along the Hoy shore.
Excellent.
To have a look at what's of interest there. So it's a great trip.
Amazing. So we've come to Gills Bay, so that where the ferry terminal is. This is where lots of people will pass across to Orkney from Caithness just here. And I believe there's some rocks of interest to you.
There are indeed. So loads of people passing through here, but no one, of course, comes down onto the shore.
No, that's true.
So we've got the rocky shoreline with the shore platform, and that's in the sandstone, the Old Red Sandstone. And then we've got this rather splendid beach with the wonderful variety of colours. Most of this stuff is from the sandstone, but as we'll see, there are some special exotic rocks here. And then behind us, what we're actually really here for to have a look at is these grassy slopes are concealing the boulder clay.
Okay.
There's glacial deposits which go up basically to the fence posts, and we're going to have a good look at those.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. So we've gathered here just a few of these exotic rocks, and some of them are really quite distinctive. We've got a nice grey granite here, and we've got a number of these schists, these metamorphic rocks, mainly sandy. There's another one and another one. And these rocks are from out of the Northern Highlands.
Okay.
This one is a conglomerate from the base of the Devonian, so it's a rock which was accumulated in a desert environment.
Oh wow!
With lots of mountains and shedding debris. And this is from the county of Caithness, probably. So that little assemblage of stones, the granites and the metamorphic rocks, are telling us that they were moved out of the Northern Highlands, and these stones are basically coming out of the boulder clay. So these are glacial erratics.
Okay.
Telling us that the ice has moved out of the Northern Highlands into the Moray Firth and ended up here.
Wow, quite a journey.
It is.
So where Adrian's sitting, we've got these quite big sheets of rock, and then as we move this way, we can see some bigger chunks. And as we keep moving, it starts to break up into these wee bitties here. Can you explain why that is?
I can try, that's for sure. I think I'm sitting on the bedrock here, and I've got boulder clay sitting on top of the bedrock. And it seems to me that this rock surface has been pulled apart and has disintegrated into blocks. And the blocks have been transported in that direction.
Ah, okay.
Now, we looked at some striations just around the corner, and the striations were saying basically ice is moving from here to there.
Yeah.
So what I guess is happening here is that we're seeing the erosion at the base of the ice. The ice is sliding over this surface, and the surface is disintegrating into blocks because it's actually being pulled apart, and we can see some of that in these clefts here. The rock is disintegrating, and the transport is very local because the blocks are really, really angular, but they're getting smaller over a very short distance.
So we've got more evidence then of that movement in that direction.
We've got evidence of the movement in that direction, which is terrific. And we've also got pretty significant erosion here, because this is just a moment in time underneath the glacier.
Yeah.
And there's a metre of rock gone. So that's pretty significant.
Wow. So we've got some bedrock here, and it's got a really defined boundary here. But then just above it, we've got some different materials. We've got some what looks like sand, and then little bits of stone. What's going on there?
Okay, so you're quite right. We've got a very sharp contact here on top of the bedrock. And then these are quite angular stones. And what I suspect is happening here is that these represent crushing of the rock following the kind of fracturing and breakup and pull apart that we saw just recently.
Oh, wow.
So we're at the base of the ice now.
Yeah.
We've got our noses up close to the contact between the ice and the rock. And this is the material which is being dragged along and gradually broken up. And it's the base of the boulder clay.
Wow.
So.
Okay, and then, well, looking closer again, we've got some other pieces. We've got this kind of off-white coloured bit as well.
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
the same stuff, or is that something different?
Well, it's a pebble which is in the boulder clay, but yeah, we've definitely not seen any of those on the beach. There's a few things here which we are familiar with. There's lots and lots of sandstone, but I can see up here there's a bit of granite. So those are the same, but this is a bit different. But I picked out one of those, and I've got one here to show you. So if you have a look at that.
Oh wow, it's a completely different texture.
It is a completely different texture, and maybe scrape it
Sure.
with the trowel and see how hard it is.
Oh, look at that.
Okay. Right, so that's really quite a soft rock. You've got a nice scratch on that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a bit of chalk.
Oh wow.
So
There's not a lot of that around here.
there isn't, no. So when we think about chalk, we think about the southeast of England, and Kent and places like that. And the nearest outcrop of chalk here is about 30 kilometres to the east out in the North Sea.
Okay.
So the ice has crossed the chalk outcrop and come into the Pentland Firth, moving from east to west. And
Wow.
We've seen that story before.
We have indeed.
Yeah.
And then I've spotted one other thing that's caught my eye, and this quite bright white little bit of something.
Yeah, well, we see quite a lot of that also on the North Isles of Orkney, and we're looking basically at little pieces which are a bit like that.
That's a bit of shell.
It is.
Very old shell?
I think it probably is. If I was pushed, and you may push me now, I would say that was an Arctica islandica, because it's a big shell, and it's the hinge part that gets preserved. So this is a shell which we can find in Scottish waters today, but as the name suggests, it's more happy in the cool waters around Iceland.
Wow.
So we've got to basically put this back into the boulder clay and think that that has been picked up from some sediment before the ice advanced. And we kind of know when the last ice advance was. It's kicked off about 32,000 years ago.
Wow.
So I reckon that nice little bit of shell is at least 30,000 years old, and could be much more than that.
That's wild.
It is, it's good. So we're on top of Barifa Hill here, which is just behind Dunnet Head. It's the highest point in the landscape. I think it gets up to about 120 metres.
Yeah, about that.
And we've come here to basically look at this rock surface. And, well, it doesn't look much to start with, but you'll probably find when we get up close that there are some interesting features. We've got this area here, which looks like a normal piece of sandstone on the moor. It's got all these little pits on it. It's obviously weathered, but the rock behind it is smoother. And if we go over to it, then we should see that we've got some marks on it. Perhaps we can pick them out.
I can see quite a difference in colours here. We've got the grey here, which I'm guessing is from some old lichen. That's a different colour. Why is it a different colour?
Well, It looks to me as though the soil cover has been taken off fairly recently. So
Okay.
we've got a contrast here between an exposed and weathered surface with its little pits, and then we've got a very different surface down here. So let's go and have a look at it.
Okay. Now I'm seeing scratches here
I think you are.
along here.
And they're parallel scratches.
Yes, very, very straight scratches.
And we've seen these before at Gills Bay.
Ah, okay, yes, we did.
Yeah, so these are striations, yes, again.
Yeah.
Now they're very faint, and we need to put a little bit of water on these to see if we can see them a bit better. And that looks as though...
Yeah, well, look at that. This one as well.
Okay, let's... So we've got here some striations, and that means we've got scratches underneath the ice. So we imagine at the base of the ice we've got a particle like this coming along and scratching the rock surface. And the great thing is, of course, we can measure these, and in terms of their orientation. So if I put my phone on that with the compass on it, we see that we've got an orientation more or less west to east.
Yeah.
And that's perfect, because that means that the ice is flowing through the Pentland Firth and out to the Atlantic. And of course, there's another interest here because we've got a big hill.
Yes.
So the ice is clearly coming up and over quite a large hill.
Yeah.
So that means there's a tremendous pressure behind it, pushing it
Ah, okay.
out in towards the Atlantic.
Excellent.
We've got this huge channel in front of us of Pentland Firth, and we're looking out over towards the hills of Hoy. And in terms of what we've seen so far at Gills Bay and on Berefa Hill, it's pretty clear that this is a channel which has been eroded out by glaciers and ice sheets.
So how would that have formed? Can you give me some more detail?
Yeah, we're talking big glaciers here. We're talking ice sheets.
Okay.
So we've seen that the ice has come up and over hills. The ice would have covered the hills of Hoy as well, and probably the ice thickness in this spot during the last glacial maximum would be about 1 kilometre. So it's a really thick
That's vast.
and powerful flow of ice.
Wow.
And because we're dealing with sandstone here, which basically splits into blocks along its bedding planes and across its fractures,
Yeah.
then the glacial erosion can be really effective, particularly in places where the rock is more closely fractured than others.
Okay.
So perhaps the faults that run through the Pentland Firth have helped to speed this erosion on. And we need to remember that we're not just talking about one ice sheet, we're talking about lots of different ice sheets.
Oh, so there was many?
Yes, the Ice Age is not a single cold period. We more or less get big glaciations every 100,000 years, and the conventional start of the Ice Age is about 2.7 million years ago.
Wow.
So we've had tens of glaciations potentially coming through here.
Okay.
So each of them can do quite a lot of work, and then you stack it up, and all of a sudden you've got a channel here which can have a floor at about 100 meters below sea level.
Okay, that's vast, yeah.
So there's a great deal of erosion. And that means that the view that we have in front of us is a view which did not exist before the Ice Age.
No.
The sea was not here, the channel was not here.
Which is almost completely unfathomable.
Well, it is a long time, and it is a lot of change. In terms of geology, you get used to dealing with million-year time frames. But I think it's reasonable that the whole shape of Scotland was changed by the Ice Age. So the Murray Firth was not an arm of the sea. We know that perhaps about 5 million years ago there was a big delta from rivers coming out of the Northern Highlands in the North Sea.
Oh.
And the drainage for Orkney and for Shetland at that time was basically into the North Sea. The rivers were flowing that way.
Yeah.
So this just did not exist.
Just wasn't here at all. So I've taken you to the north end of the island, and behind us you can see a very well-known piece of water called the Swelky. So what we've got is a huge rush of water coming in here from the North Sea at the turning of the tides, and we can see some really fast-paced water at the top, but underneath is where all the magic is happening, if you want to call it. It'll be completely tumultuous with all the currents coming together from different little bodies of water.
So we've got a whirlpool here, yeah?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
You can't see it so defined at the moment, but you can definitely get a sense of how dangerous this water is just with this pace of water coming through.
So it's another sign of the power of the sea here on...
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we've got this really amazing rock shelf here, and we don't see any rock debris.
No, there's nothing at all.
So it must be swept clear of any debris and any rocks during storms. And it's a reminder that the most powerful periods of wave activity are during big storms. So you found some information on Stromness about a big storm.
Absolutely.
But a long time ago.
A long, long time ago, yes. The storm of 1862.
1862, okay.
Would you like to hear the passage?
The source of that, where was it from?
Alexander Geeky.
Oh, Geology of Scotland. Very good.
So the passage goes, the great storm of 1862 swept the sea over the north end island of Stromness.
Which is where we are.
Which is exactly where we are. And redistributed the ruin heaps here. So the waves ran bodily up and over the vertical cliffs on the west side, 200 feet in height.
200 feet?
So loading portions of wrecked boats, stones and seaweed onto the top. So they rushed in torrents across the island, tearing up the ground and rocks in their course towards the old mill at Netherton on the opposite side.
Wow. Now that's important, because 200 feet, those are really, really big waves. That's bigger than anything that we saw over on the coast.
Far bigger.
So it would be great if we could actually find some evidence of that event.
Fingers crossed.
Let's try. So we have another platform here, swept clear of debris, and then we've got all these rocks which have been brought up to the back of the platform. And we're exposed here fully to the might of the Atlantic storms.
Yeah.
This is where the big waves are coming in. And I think a lot of these blocks are basically moved by storm waves.
Okay.
And there's a detail that I'd like to show you that might just tie this into the big storm of 1862.
Sure.
So here we have a set of blocks which have very likely been moved by storm waves. This big boy here probably has a weight of about 4 metric tons, just looking at the size of it.
Wow.
So that takes a bit of lift and move. And you notice that these flat boulders here, they're all stacked up like bricks.
Yeah, they're kind of going in one direction.
Absolutely, and that's typical of fast water movement. And it basically tells us that the storm wave water is moving in this direction.
Ah, okay.
But then you've got, of course, the question of what storm was it? When did it happen?
I mean, the first thing I notice when I see it is there's a huge amount of lichen that has grown on these rocks.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important because although the lichen grows fairly rapidly, to have such a dense cover probably takes more than a century. So you might have put your finger on some evidence that suggests that this was actually the 1862 storm that shifted these blocks.
Fantastic.
And that would actually make sense because, you know, we're at the limit of these big blocks here. This is as high as they've come. So if 1862 really was a big storm in historic terms, then that would explain this limit today. So that's kind of neat.
That's quite exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Funny how it's cooled down. Now you're on the sea. It's totally cooled down.
Hey, Katy.
Hello. Hi, Adrian. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. So, we're on the Hoy shore. Where are we just now?
We're in Hoy. We're at 8th Hope
All right, okay.
on the south shore. And the Pentland Firth somewhere out there.
So it must be. We'll have to hope that the fog's going to clear today because otherwise we won't have much of a film, but there we go. So, we're at the 8th, basically to look for some stones. Mm-hmm. So let's go see what we can find.
Great, let's go. So we've had a wander along the shore and picked up some brightly coloured, some of them different looking rocks. What have we got here, Adrian?
Well, we've got a number of interesting things. We've got a lot of gneisses, these banded rocks here, and these are probably out from the Northern Highlands somewhere.
Wow.
We've got a few more granitic rocks, like this one, and we've got one here which looks very much like, to me, the Helmsdale granite. So that's coming from down by Dunbeath and from Helmsdale itself. So it's an assemblage of rocks which is similar to what we found at Gills Bay when I was with Mara, but there were more in the way of schist rocks rather than the gneisses. So this is perhaps coming from a little bit further south and and the ice is moving out into the Moray Firth and then recurving.
Interesting.
But you found this one, which is a very distinctive rock, and it's bright, it's shiny, it's hard, it's dense, it's a quartzite, and I can't be sure just exactly where that's from, but well, I have found on this beach a Cambrian quartzite, similar colour, similar texture, but this one had worm burrows in it. But rather unfortunately, I think that boulder is under the water here, so we won't be able to show you that today.
The tide's coming too far.
Yeah.
But what's special about that? Why,
oh yeah, okay.
Why were we searching for this special Cambrian quartzite?
Well, it's a long way away to the Cambrian outcrop. So the Cambrian is something that we usually associate with the Northwest Highlands, getting over towards Assynt. So for that boulder to get to the beach here on Hoy, we have to transport from somewhere quite close to Ullapool, quite close to the ice shed.
That's really far west.
It is a long way away, and we've got to initially come down probably southeast towards the Moray Firth and the ice flow, and then we've got to hook a left in the Moray Firth, come along the Moray Firth, turn into the Pentland Firth, and then melt the ice and leave the rock. So
Crikey.
It's had an amazing journey to get this far.
And how was that done in lots of different stages over? How long are we talking in terms of time?
I don't know, but with such a resistant rock, it is possible that it can go through many phases of glacial transport and finally end up here.
So Adrian, is this boulder clay?
It certainly is. It's really similar to what we saw on the south side of the Pentland Firth at Gills Bay. So, Katy, you're from Stromness Museum, and you've got quite a lot of rock specimens and rock collections there. Is that right?
Yes, we are the Museum of Orkney Natural History Society, so we've got rock specimens, minerals, and even a collection of thin section rock slides collected by Ted Kellett. So there's a lot from Orkney, but also some more exotic ones as well.
Okay, and so what's on at the museum just now?
Well, this year we're actually celebrating mineralogy and mineralogists. Our Ted Kellett rock slides have been catalogued over the past year. We've been using our new microscope to take microscope photos of the slides under cross-polarised light, and the exhibition's a chance to kind of showcase that. But we also wanted to celebrate another Orkney mineralogist, Matthew Forster Heddle.
Heddle?
Yeah, and
he was a big man in Scottish mineralogy in the 19th century. Wrote a big textbook on Scottish minerals, collected an enormous amount of stuff.
Yeah.
And you've got part of his collection.
Well, this year we've asked National Museum of Scotland for a loan of some of Matthew Forster Heddle's collection. He collected, as you said, an enormous amount, and I think his collection in the National Museum numbers about 7,000 specimens.
That's my kind of geologist, I think, yes.
So I went down to Edinburgh and had a look, met the curators there and chose a selection of his Orkney minerals. because they've never actually been shown in Orkney before. So we're really excited to be able to exhibit them this year in our summer exhibition.
Well, that's really special. And where was Heddle from in Orkney?
Well, he just happens to have been born and brought up behind us at Melsetter. So this was his boyhood haunt.
Here?
Yeah, as we were walking along the shore this morning, we were literally probably walking in his footsteps. And being a boy of the 19th century in Orkney, he was a real explorer, and it's evident from the places that he collected minerals just how well he knew Hoy and its landscape and all the little nooks and crannies where he might have been able to find interesting rocks and minerals.
Okay. So we've reached Rackwick.
Yeah, so lovely to be here. It's such a gorgeous place. You can see why George Mackay Brown called it the Hidden Valley of Light, because it's just wonderful.
Yes, it's brilliant today to be out here. Early in May, nice temperature, the first flowers out. It's surely a very, very special place to be. And we're here now today to have a look at some of this magnificent scenery. So we are looking back into the Pentland Firth, and we have these magnificent vertical cliffs of Craiggate, and we're going to have a look at some of the smaller features which relate to the ice in the Pentland Firth pushing into this particular area. And we'll drop down onto the Stone Beach and have a look at some of the bonny boulders and try and understand how they are moving around today.
So Adrian, what is it about the side of the slope you can see behind us that tells us about movement of ice?
Well, we're below the cliffs of Craiggate. You can see that there's been a big rockfall, fairly recent, because it's come down onto the beach. So that's a very unstable slope. And then in these bluffs here, these brown sections, you can see there's a tremendous number of angular blocks, some of which have come from above, but some of that material is also moving along the side of the hill. And over on your right, you can see that we've got this slope which represents a form of moraine on the edge of the ice. So materials coming down off the hill, landing on the edge of the ice surface and being transported in that way. Yeah.
Wow.
So what that means is that the ice is coming in from the Pentland Firth, pushing into Rackwick. And in fact, as it did that, it created quite a large lake in here, and that's why we've got so much sand in this valley. So that was basically sedimented really rapidly as the ice came in, and the lake basin was filled up. And all of that happened during the ice retreat. The ice is coming back from the Atlantic and going back into the Moray Firth. So we've come down to the Bonnie Boulders of Rackwick, and I believe some of your pals have got a few things they'd like to know about them.
Yeah, a few things. One of the first things is, why are they so huge?
Well, they are enormous, aren't they? I mean, these ones are over a metre long, and that's not usual on Orkney.
No, I can't think of another beach in Orkney with such big and round and smooth boulders.
Yeah. Well, I suggest there's maybe two reasons. One is when we look at the cliff behind us, we can see that the bedding planes are really far apart and the fractures are far apart, so it breaks into really big blocks, and that's where most of these blocks have come from. But the other thing is that we're in a very high energy storm environment here. We're exposed to the full force of the Atlantic waves, so we've got enough wave energy to shift these boulders up and down the shore.
Yeah, which makes them such smooth-sided stone.
Yeah, that's why they're so beautifully rounded.
Yeah. Another question was, how come there's so many different colours?
Well, yeah, that's where we need John Flett Brown with us, because he's the expert on the Old Red Sandstone. But it's partly rock type, so we've got these grey basalts, and then we've got the sandstones. But the sandstones have got lots of different colours, picked out mainly along the bedding planes. So we've got pale browns, purples, reds, yellows, lots and lots of lovely colours. I think that's mainly to do with the iron oxide concentration in the rock.
Right.
But to be honest, I do need John for some help here.
I know, he's well missed, that's for sure.
And the other thing about the colour is to do with the lichen and the algae on the rock. So we've got on the lower part of the shore a full covering of algae on the big boulders. They clearly don't move that often in storms, whereas these ones are almost free of lichen. So they must move regularly, most winters.
Yeah, that's funny, because I was listening to an oral history story on Hoy Heritage talking about the fishermen of Rackwick having to almost dig the boulders away from their boat when they came to after the winter. So they do move, although they're huge, they move further than you think.
And more often than we think, yeah. Okay, so it's time to head off to our final stop over at the Old Man of Hoy.
Great, well, let's get up and head around over the two of the head.
Okay, that's a stiff climb, and I think we might find that the weather will hold.
Fingers crossed.
So the Old Man has attracted visitors for hundreds of years.
It has indeed. There's umpteen postcards, there's paintings and drawings, and those are really useful to us because they can help us chart the changes over time.
And it's been shown on early maps, is that right?
Yes, it's depicted on Blau's map, which is in the 1600s, and then Murdo Mackenzie's map in the 1700s, but it's depicted as a headland.
All right, so the Old Man is connected to the rest of the cliffs at that point, yes?
Yeah, it certainly seems so. And then we've got a Daniel's painting, which was from 1819, and the Old Man is a sea stack, but he's got much more to him. He's got two legs and he's a bit broader.
Yes, so it's a much broader feature with an arch at the bottom, yes?
That's right. And then in 1883, our own Matthew Forster Heddle sent a letter to his good friend Sir Archibald Geekie, who was he worked at the British Geological Survey, and he's depicted the old man before and after, and now and then. So you can see the then is more akin to the William Daniels painting, where the old man's got two legs with a hole in the middle, and then what he was like in 1883 with a pile of rubble at his feet.
So this whole section has fallen in sometime before 1882.
Yep.
That's quite a change.
It is, in not very long a period of time.
So now we're up close and personal with the old man.
Yeah, what an amazing spectacle.
It is a magnificent pinnacle. We can see the horizontal layers of the Old Red Sandstone.
Yeah, and you can see it's sitting on a lava flow, volcanic rock.
The grey rock at the bottom, yes,
yeah.
That's fine. And goodness, we can see the rubble at the base of the stack where part of the other leg fell.
So you can, a big pile of boulders there.
It is. So it reminds us that the old man is a pretty fragile form, but actually there hasn't been a great deal of change since Heddle's sketch in 1880.
And back then he said the old man was on his last leg.
That's right, so the guy's doing quite well. And that's not altogether surprising, because there's a tremendous weight of rock on the lower layers of the sandstone there, keeping the fractures closed. It's very difficult for the waves to extract blocks, for the water to get in. But you spotted that...
This vertical crack at the top there, is that a worry?
I think so. There's a series of vertical cracks here, and to me it looks as though there's a slice waiting to go off at the base. And once that goes, then perhaps we'll lose most of the top.
So we might lose a shoulder.
Yeah, we might lose a shoulder. As to when that will happen, well, it's difficult to say. There's no obvious sign of undercutting at the moment at the base. And there hasn't been a great deal of change since Heddle did his sketch.
No, there hasn't really. Maybe we just need the next big storm.
Well, yeah, and that reminds us that when we were on Stromness, we were looking at the effects of a big storm in 1862. And if I'm right, 1862 fits in between the two great images that we have of this stack.
Isn't that funny? I never even thought of that. Just sort of in the middle between the Daniels print and Matthew Forster Heddle's drawing.
Yeah, so perhaps.
I think we need to do some more research.
I think we do.
So Adrian, you've been on quite a journey this last few days. Tell us about what you've been finding.
Well, it's certainly been a fantastic journey. We started off with Mara on the south shore of the Firth, and there we found that the Pentland Firth probably didn't exist before the Ice Age. It's a product of the excavation by the great glaciers coming out of the Moray Firth. And then
you came over to Stromness.
We had a great trip on Stromness, and we could see the power of the sea in excavating the great sea caves and the gloops. And then we came over, of course,
to the Hoy Shore.
To the Hoy Shore.
Yeah, where we met.
We teamed up, and we followed in the footsteps of
Matthew Forster Heddle, the great mineralogist. Yeah.
That was a great privilege. And then into the beautiful Rackwick Bay, where we saw where the last glaciers had pushed into the bay. And now here we are looking out over the cliffs of West Hoy at the end of the trip.
What a perfect way to finish.
I think so.
Thank you.